Hi, I'm Andrew Wasson. Thanks for tuning in to my weekly guitar blog. It is Saturday, May 21st, 2011. If this is the first time you're tuning into the guitar blog, what we do here is we answer questions that are sent to me off of my guitar blog website. If you want to hit that, it is at andrewwasson.com. And this time around, we've got 3 questions we're going to be going through. The first one was sent to me by Len. He lives in Spain. And it was a rather lengthy email that he sent in, but I've condensed it somewhat. Basically, Len is 60, and he's getting back into guitar again. It sounds like he was in a few bands and did some work, but never was quite happy with his playing. So I'm just going to go through what I've condensed here from Len's lengthy question. It is, I want to learn to play properly to be able to solo at will and to know more than just a blues scale or a solo that I've learnt by rote. Where would you recommend that I start? I'd like to hear with some of you, what some of your recommendations would be. Well, basically, when I get an email like this one, I have to say up front, and this is the exact same kind of thing that I say to students when they come in who are, let's say, late 50s, early 60s, and they want to get back into playing, and do it very seriously. It depends on how busy your lifestyle is. It's a huge factor in any adult trying to get really serious about their guitar playing. If you have a very busy life, like I'll give you some instances here. I once had a guy come in, and he was a contractor. He ran a fairly big contracting company. He was very wealthy, well off, but he just didn't have the time to get back into guitar like he wanted to. I'll give you one other scenario. I had a fella come in who I guess he had sold his business. He was pretty much set up, but it sounded like he had, a number of children, in his life, and he was trying to, get them established in their lives like we do as parents. We try to get our kids off on the best footing that they can possibly get off on. And, I could go into many other scenarios here, but I think you're probably starting to get the picture about being an older adult and getting into music very heavily. Now, let me counter this with what it's like when you're young and you're getting into music. Let's say I take an average 14-year-old kid who comes in, and to come in with me, I don't really teach children, but if somebody calls me, a parent, a mother, a father calls me and they say, I've got a 14-year-old or a 15-year-old. They've taken guitar lessons already for 2 or 3 years. They're pretty serious. Will you take them on as a student? And I usually do at that point. So what we do when we get in is we start going through and building a very good awareness of the fingerboard and understanding how improvisation works. We go through all the material. And the person, being at that young age, they have no serious commitments in life. They may or may not have a girlfriend or boyfriend. They may not have very much else to do around the house aside from maybe a couple of chores. Maybe they got to wash the dishes a couple times a week and throw on a load or 2 of laundry, and maybe they got to take the garbage out once a week or something like that. If they, the list could go on about chores, but I think you're starting to get the picture. The level of the serious commitments that they have outside of playing this instrument are very low. And what happens with the comparison of adults trying to get heavy into music and younger teenagers, let's say, getting into music begins there, but it certainly does not end there. There's a big background factor that most people never consider. And to be honest, I didn't really notice it for many years when I started teaching. And, I've taught for a long time. I started teaching full-time back in 1992. So I've got some years under my belt in terms of teaching. And what I noticed after being involved with teaching for quite a while is the younger crowd, even heading up into the early 20s, they are not very concerned with progress. It's the last thing they care about. They're more interested in, at the moment, at that maybe that 1 week or 2 or 3 week period when they're jamming out on something, what's going on with that and what's happening with that, and then they go on to something else and their level of interest peaks out at something else. Now, let me compare that to an adult, let's say somebody who's perhaps in their late 30s, early 40s. they get very concerned about their level of progress and how they're doing, and they get very hard on themselves. They're very judgmental, and they start thinking that, you know, I'm too old to do this, and they say all these crazy things to themselves. Plus, now you got to remember, they are also dealing with a ton of responsibility. If you're maybe in your 50s or 60s, you're probably wrapping up paying off your mortgage. You're probably really concerned with what's going on with your retirement savings plans and your financial side of life. You've got all kinds of bills you're trying to stay on top of, and it's very, very, very serious stuff. And on top of that, if you're in your 60s or your 50s, you have children, you're very concerned about how their lives are going. You've got a lot going on in your mind. Now, I don't know how much energy it takes just to basically think through stuff, but I imagine it probably takes close to like 50% of the power of your brain to basically, process thought. And, once you get past that level, you start kind of burning your mind out. When you consider being older and how much stress you're under when you're trying to learn and develop your skill set, and you compare that to what it's like when you're younger, there's miles of difference in the psychology of what's going on. Now, you're probably wondering, oh, wow, Andrew, you're going off on a big tangent here. It's taken you a couple of minutes to sort of do this spiel of all these psychological things between the age generations and playing guitar. And yes, I am. I'm giving a big breakdown about it because it's very, very important that people understand that there's a completely different psyche and there's a completely different set of parameters that older students have when they jump into more serious playing on the instrument as compared to younger students. So, what does this mean overall? Well, let me tell you from a standpoint of a guitar teacher what this means. It means that the failure rate for older adult students learning this instrument, either at especially at introductory level, beginner level, and then heading into even an intermediate level, and then it's very dicey when it shoots to the advanced level. Basically, there's a very, very high failure rate in terms of success. So anyone that's older, getting into this instrument and, trying to think about high degrees of success, I have to forewarn you from all of my experience in this instrument, it's very hit and miss of how much you can develop your skill sets when you're older. And, I hate to sort of throw this out there, and I know probably people will disagree with me, but I really got to stick to my guns on that and stress the fact that there is a ridiculously high failure rate with people having much success the older they get onwards in life. Now, let's move on to a whole other concept on this too. You may have heard of this, but there's a concept out there that's called the 10,000 hour principle. And if you're not familiar with it, look it up online, just Google it. There's loads and loads and loads of stuff about this principle out there. And what this 10,000 hour concept is it's an idea that was brought forth by, I can't remember what his background was. I can't remember if he was an engineer or a psychologist or a teacher or educator, what his background was. But he basically determined through a lot of study that it takes 10,000 hours to reach a level of mastery in any given field. And I would, again, have to agree with that statement. I have played guitar myself since I was 8 years old, and I'm 41 years old now. So you can imagine, probably in that time frame, I probably put in my 10,000 hours. So you could just do the math on your own of where you're at in your life, how long you've played, make some assumptions, put the years together, the possible hours together, and try to see where you're at as a player, because that plays a huge role in itself. Now, people really want to get good, and the older they are, they have a very different outlook of what getting good is. Getting good to an older adult person is basically, in my opinion, from what I've seen over the years, it is a level of mastery. Well, if you don't got 10,000 hours at least into the level of skill that you need for this instrument, it's very unlikely that you're going to reach those levels. Now, let me just refresh my memory on the question here quickly, because there were some things I can tell you. about what it is that you want to do. Len, if I haven't completely bummed you out so far. You're saying here, I want to learn to play properly, to be able to solo at will. Well, first of all, to be able to play properly, you want to have excellent technique. That's going to take a lot of hours put into technique development, exercises, and training. My suggestion, if you can do it, would probably be to put at least an hour a day in and judge your progress on perhaps 3 to 6 month periods of work on that. I usually tell my students to look for goals of decent levels of skill in about a 2.5 to 3 year period in the level of technique. To be able to solo at will, that is a huge commitment, because what that involves is you have to understand intervallic design, concepts on applying arpeggios so you know how to play over any kind of chord situation. You want to understand your scale relationships, your modes. Harmony and theory has to be there. So it's a huge amount of work, and I usually tell people there's a whole combination of stuff that has to go on. I think it's very important to have a teacher. I think it's also really important to maybe hit your local conservatory of music or music college, take some ear training courses, some courses on rhythm, and some music theory courses at whatever is near you. If it's a music conservatory or possibly a university that does day courses or adult courses, or possibly a music college. Now you're also going on to say, knowing a little bit more than just the blues scale or a solo that you've learned by rote. It's very important when you're wanting to develop your ability to improvise and play solos that you study a lot of other people's solos. So I usually tell people to start with groups of 10 or 12 pieces, work through those over the course of maybe 3 or 4 months, then flip into a new batch of 10 pieces or 11 or 12 pieces, and spend a couple of years. I usually find people have good success after 3 or 4 years of going through a lot of pieces of music where they are building other people's solos, and that could be anything. If you have favorite guitar players, you know, if you love David Gilmour and you like Pink Floyd, dive into that stuff. If you like I don't know, Deep Purple, if you like Led Zeppelin, you know, if you like some of the shredder guys like Eddie Van Halen or Steve Vai, dig into those solos. But you've got to learn other players' solos, because that's how you're going to get a lot of ideas, which you will use as springboard ideas to take you off into your own style. Now, that's basically, I think, about all I have to cover on Len's question. So, number one, Len, I hope I didn't bum you out, but there's a lot to consider about reaching high levels of skill when you're in an older age bracket as an adult, and you also have to be very aware that there is a very high failure rate. And like I said, hope I didn't bum you out, but I'm really trying to be honest and, you know, take it and run with it. I would say give yourself at least 5 or 6 years, dive heavy into it. If you can put in about 3 to 4 hours or more, you know, maximum. I mean, I usually tell people who are very serious about guitar that it's important to put in about 6 hours of practice on a daily basis, at least 4 or 5 days through the entire week. So I know that's a lot of time. If you've got other commitments, it's going to be very difficult. But with that, and maybe about 3 or 4 or 5 years under your belt and attacking this stuff, taking the college courses and getting a teacher and doing some work, I think you're going to achieve really high levels of skill. And you know, my best wishes to you. You got a lot of work ahead of you, but hopefully it all works out in the end. Now let's go to the next question. And the next question is coming to us from Alex. Alex wrote in saying, how can I come up with original guitar riffs? When I try to come up with one, I always end up sounding like Nirvana. How do I fix this problem? Well, you know, Alex, I noticed in your question, you kind of did a very typical thing a lot of people do when they write in. They state what they don't want. You know, I don't want to sound like Nirvana. So what you got to do initially is you got to start thinking about who you do want to sound like. So, you know, let's say, you know, if you would have wrote in to me and you would have said, I would like to sound like, I don't know, Richie Blackmore from Deep Purple or something like that, you know. So you focus on a guitarist, and of course, how do you sound like a person? Well, you copy their style. You learn their guitar solos, and you basically understand the background about what they're using for scales, what their favorite lines are, and how they execute those lines. And of course, you don't want to forget about what's happening in terms of their rhythm ideas either. So let's just say, you know, like, you know, you really enjoyed a guitarist that happen to use a lot of pentatonic, and you started looking at some of their songs, and you noticed that they were playing quite a lot in the key of A minor and quite a lot in the key of E minor. So the first thing that I would do is plot out the whole neck using all the pentatonics that they might use and whatever those patterns might be. You would find that out when you started learning their leads and some of the licks and riffs that they use in their songs. Plot that out along the neck, find out their favorite locations, find out how they phrase, how do they use their slides, their bends, their hammer-ons and pull-offs. How do they do their vibrato? Is it a fast vibrato or is it a rather slow vibrato? Make distinctions about how they do things. How do they normally bend? Do they, bend ideas where they do a lot of full step bends? Or they do double stop bends where they're playing, two notes all the time against one another? So, make determinations on how they're doing things. Or maybe perhaps do they bend by way of a half step all the time? They find certain areas of the scale that they really like those half step style bends. You'll have to make a lot of determinations about the players that you do like and work a lot to understand those players' style, how they're executing things, and of course you'll want to mimic them. Now, if you have a whole host of people that you really admire in terms of players, you'll probably want to really dig into all those people, and it might take a while. It could take you literally months even to just learn one person's style. But of course, you know me, that's not the only thing I'm going to suggest. My other suggestion, of course, is to get a decent teacher. I know I sound like a broken record, always saying that statement, but if you can't find a teacher, you're going to find it's very difficult to do on your own. It's really hard to go through this instrument and get a decent level of skill on this instrument doing it all on your own, just sort of checking out a few YouTube videos, buying a few books. You're doing a very secluded type of learning strategy that way, and it doesn't work that great for music. If you can, like I said in the previous question when I answered it, hit the local music conservatories or maybe music colleges that offer some day courses or whatnot, and get involved with a music course, even if it's something basic like ear training that you can get in with a group of people and start experiencing what it's like to be around other players. And what that does for you in a nutshell is it teaches you basically where your limitations are, because in a group of folks, when you're learning music ideas, you'll find some people excel at certain concepts of it. Other people do not do very well in the same concepts, but they excel in another area. So what you can do through a group, let's say if you've got a classroom situation where maybe there's 10 or 11 people in it or something, you'll start to be able to focus on different people, and you'll be able to go to them, and say, hey, you know what, I noticed that you're really good at understanding such and such an idea on this topic. How are you thinking about that? Can you maybe go through some of this, on the instrument that you play? Because, got to remember, in a community college aspect with most music programs, not everyone's going to play guitar. You might find some horn players there. There could be some piano players. There could be other stringed instrument players. And, you have to kind of glean off of the way people are thinking. But these environments, they work wonders for helping you to understand where you're at. I mean, okay, when I went to music college, most of you may very well know, I went to a school in California called the Musicians Institute. I went to their faculty of guitar there called the Guitar Institute of Technology. And I went in the very early 90s. I moved out there in 1991, and there were lots of students in that school. I think there were over 1,100 students in the school at that point. I know there were over 200 guitar players in the school when I went. There were many classes of guitar players, and I can honestly say I do think that I probably learned as much, if not possibly more, from the other students as I did from the teachers and curriculum combined. So you start realizing pretty fast that it's the accelerated learning that happens from the group and the perspectives of all the people that are in the course with you and that are taking classes with you that really does it. So that's my suggestion on that front. So anyway, I hope that helps you out a little bit. There's a lot of study and a lot of work to do to develop skills at improvisation. So keep working on it and keep developing those skills. Let's go to the next question. All right, the last question that I'm going to go through is from Charles, and he wrote in saying, when I see guitarists such as Tommy Emmanuel and Joe Pass improvise, they often do so without a backing track or any musical support. They create solo pieces with such depth and musicality that I don't understand how they're doing it. Some of their improvisations appear physically simple, but how they're constructing their improvisation intellectually is beyond me. They seem to wrap scales, arpeggios, and chord progressions into one dynamic musical piece. I feel like I'm missing something simple, but I've yet to see anybody demonstrate such a concept. Well, when you compare people to Tommy Emmanuel or Joe Pass or some of these guys, I mean, these guys are absolute masters of the instrument. And, you know, no wonder you don't see very many people demonstrating what they're doing, because they're at such a high level of skill that it's, you know, it's almost ridiculous what these guys can do. Now, let's talk about some of the ideas that are going on more than likely in their mind when they're doing this stuff. Because first of all, you got to understand, these guys have an incredible background in music theory, in harmony, and understanding intervallics. They understand everything to do with arpeggio structures, modal structures, scalar concepts. And their knowledge of it, of the geometry of it, I gotta say, on the fingerboard, is at an absolute ridiculous level. Now, you probably wonder, how do you get to these kind of levels? Well, not everybody can achieve these kind of levels, because it takes combinations of not only the amount of time, the background, the environment that they were involved in, the level of natural ability, because you have to factor that part in. Some people just have an enormous amount of natural ability. It might not be in every single musical area, but it can be very strong when it comes to performance and the ability to focus. Now, when you hear, especially someone like Joe Pass, where there's lots of movement, there's lots of structure to what's happening harmonically with that guy's playing, you got to realize that the amount of work that he has done in his life on understanding jazz theory, jazz harmony, and all the connections of chords, and also about how easy it would be for him to take a piece, reharmonize it, or even just think of, you know, let's say, you know, you were in the key of A minor, for instance, you know, just to, how easy is it for, let's say, for you to sit down and just think about randomly about all the chords in that key. And just make up something like that. You know, just improvise it. I didn't know what I was going to do when I played through that. In fact, I started in A minor and I ended in the relative major of C. I played a C6-9 chord at the end. If your mind isn't at a level musically where you can easily just rip something out in whatever key you pick at whatever moment, you are not going to have the chops to be able to do what a Tommy Emmanuel or a Joe Pass does, or a Pat Martino does. I mean, these guys, you know, I have a decent level of it, but I mean, these guys are extraordinary. They're beyond belief. There's an old absolute master of that whole style. His name is Chet Bro. You got to check this. Lenny Bro. Chet Bro is his son. I know his son very well. He actually lives in my city, and I've taken lessons with him when I was a teenager. But his dad, pardon me, I got him and his dad confused, but his dad, Lenny Bro, is unbelievable. I mean, unfortunately, he passed away now, but you can listen to some of his old recordings and get an idea of where Lenny Bro was at in his level of technique. Now, these people, what their background is, plays a huge role in this. So if you think it's just a matter of sitting there and practicing, it's not just that. It's also a level of being up on a stage. It's being in the limelight, because you've got to remember there's a disconnect happening between what you are able to do in your home rehearsal studio area and how you're able to go from that to the actual stage, because it takes years of being on stage, basically, to be able to control your mind enough so that when you're in front of an audience, it's just as easy to play as when you're at home, relaxed, sitting in your living room. So keep a lot of this stuff in mind, because that's how these guys are doing it, aside from, of course, the monstrous level of musical theory and, you know, the neck geometry that obviously these people are masterful at. But anyway, I got to wrap it up for now. That's about all the time that I have for today. So I want to say thanks for watching and for sending in all the great questions. My apologies to all those folks that I don't reply. I get so many questions sent to me that I just don't have the time a lot of times to get back to folks. But got to say once again, have yourself a great week, and I will catch up with you next time. Bye for now.